Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Ethical AI session. My name is Alla Morison. I'm with International Finance Corporation. It's part of the World Bank group that works on private sector development. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and I'm a program manager for Digital Inclusion Program. So today we live in a world where decisions, big and small, personal and societal, are increasingly being handed over to algorithms, putting the public, and all of us really, at a higher risk of a flawed or biased algorithm. It's happening increasingly in critical spheres such as health, public safety, finance. So, and there are well-documented cases when people have been denied, for example, a loan or even access to pain medications wrongly. So, as public concerns continue to rise, companies and regulators are looking for new strategies, processes, policies to address these public concerns. So many countries have introduced guidelines for ethical AI, including algorithm transparency. For example, China recently passed AI regulations. EU, US, Serbia, many countries are working on AI regulations. And at the same time, we see some companies saying that it's actually infeasible for them to be fully transparent, that it would be like asking them to reveal their trade secret. And some companies have said that it's technically impossible to be fully transparent. So there is obviously an active discourse on what transparency, algorithm transparency should look like, when should it be required, and what are the right accountability mechanisms. So in the meantime, companies have started even before regulation requires them to do so, many companies have started introducing policies and processes to safeguard consumers against the users of algorithms against unintentional errors, harmful biases, or dangerous design choices. So because errors and biases in algorithm can lead to a loss of trust from the public, it is, and even to a loss of social license to operate for a company, it is important for companies to be transparent to consumers about how and when they automate their decision making, which critical decisions have been automated, what data sources are being used, and how they, as consumers, can contest a decision if they think that it is wrong. So in this session, with 3 distinguished speakers who are all corporate leaders, we will look at a subset of ethical AI, transparent algorithm, and touch upon accountability, but focus mainly on transparency. So in the next 45 minutes, we will start with exploring what does algorithm transparency really mean, look at the regulatory landscape, and discuss what are the companies doing, what are best practices emerging. So with that, it is my pleasure to go to our first speaker. I would like to introduce to you Natali Delic. She is an executive board member, as well as chief strategy officer and chief digital officer of Telecom Serbia. She is an evangelist of new technologies such as AI, 5G, and IoT. Welcome to the panel. And the first question for you, Natali, let's unpack what we mean by transparent algorithm decision making. What does a transparent algorithm look like? So here are a few options. A, everyone can look at the source code, inputs and outputs. B, everyone can see the underlying data. C, should the algorithm be explainable to the consumers by providing basic insights on the factors driving algorithmic decisions? D, should it be technically auditable? E, all of the above, D, something else. So over to you.
Thank you, Alla. It's great to be here with all the panelists and also with you. So I think that there is no one answer to this question because it at the end depends on what exactly this algorithm is doing and what is the application of AI, because not every application of AI will require deep transparency. So if we are talking about end users, they should be not probably, but they should be informed if they are interacting with AI. But is it realistic to explain them and give them the tools to really track how the decision was made? Maybe on some level this could be done with some simple UI, simple visualizations, but I think it is not really realistic so much to do it there. On the other side, if we are using AI to do something on technical systems to improve the efficiency of our systems, our technicians might need some more transparency in order to understand how something works, because right now more and more network elements, for instance in telco industry, are having AI already embedded. So sometimes this black box is preventing us of properly solving end-to-end problems. So obviously there should be some level of explainability of what is what is actually happening and how this decision is being made. So definitely this transparency will vary, and no one answer really. Technicians can understand also, some data scientists might understand the algorithm source code, but I don't think that that will be needed. I think that we will need to prove the worth and the value of AI implementations, and through that process actually to learn to trust it. That is actually something that I am right now seeing as the way forward.
Great, thank you. So let me ask the same question to our next speaker. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Drazen Orescanin. He's one of the founders and partners at Poslovna Inteligencija, an implementer of analytical IT systems in Croatia and Southeast Europe. He is also a board member in Legit, data privacy software spin-off of Poslovna Inteligencija. And he is also one of the founders and mentors in Bird Incubator for AI and analytics. Drazen, same question to you. What should a transparent algorithm look like?
Well, thank you. So yes, transparency is very complex and can be looked at in different ways. Transparency is, I think, also often mixed with explainability. And actually, I think we can talk about this new AI European Union regulation. There is something that's called Article 52. It will be, I think, more and more famous over time, which actually defines this transparency. And this transparency actually in that context means that a person should be informed and aware that he or she is communicating or using AI algorithm when person is doing this. If this is not kind of obvious. So that's like definition from Article 52. That doesn't say anything about underlying data code, what it is doing or whatever. And there is maybe one a bit better definition that I like a bit more, and it's coming from UK. So UK has really good government documents. They are open for everything. They have really good strategies, and they are putting these strategies also working in real life. So all their IT strategies, cybersecurity strategies, even strategies for developing of cycling, they are all very mature and very realistic, and they're all put in life. So they have something they call data ethics recommendations for UK government, and there is one very nice definition there what actually transparency should mean for them. And I will read you this sentence. And it says, transparency means that your actions, processes, and data are made open to inspection by publishing information about the project in a complete, open, understandable, easily accessible, and free format. So those 5 things: complete, open, understandable, easily accessible, and free format, it's important. So I think it's not important to say, okay, this is like a 3-layer neural network that is based on this and that algorithms and has 754 input features and 17 output features and the relevance of this. So you should put it in a really, really understandable way for everybody. Okay, this algorithm is doing this. And this is why we are using this algorithm and why it will help you and make your life better. And that should be like the end of it. Because there is a big debate about this new AI regulation in Europe, that it will actually, with this kind of regulation, they will kill everything that moves. So it will be so complex to get something approved and brought to the market, then nobody will do anything. And actually, there should be some middle way that will enable transparency and fast road to the market.
Yeah, thank you, Drazen. Very good points. Let me ask the same question to our third distinguished speaker, Branko Primetica. Branko is the managing director of CEDARS International, which supports the public sector with business transformation and emerging technology insertion. Prior to that, he had a company in Washington, D.C. with 400 employees who helped U.S. federal government to deploy cloud, AI, RPA, and cybersecurity.
Thank you very much. I apologize, I have a slight cold, so if my throat kind of blocks up, don't panic. I just have water in front of me. There's been a lot of discussion about what AI transparency really looks like, and I agree with points from both other distinguished speakers, but I have a slightly different viewpoint. I took your question very literally, and I said, okay, the source code can't be made publicly available because it probably has trade secrets in it, and nobody would understand it. Like, I mean, except for programmers and things like that, the public can't understand it. The underlying data, on the other hand, might contain personally identifiable information, other sensitive content, and it's going to be so overwhelming in different formats without actually any real relationships. So it's going to, the sheer volume of that data is going to confuse people even more. So my view of the definition of a transparent algorithm, and this definition shouldn't be burdensome to businesses, but it should be consumable by the public. So it's somewhere in between. First you start with it could be a little one-pager or whatever, or a website. It says, okay, what is the purpose of this algorithm? Why was it created? What's its intent? The data entities and their sources should be involved, and if PII was there. You don't need to go to every single data type. You had just at a grouping level, what kind of data went in, how the data was collected, vetted, and transformed, because that's the decision-making process that the algorithm uses in a very simple manner. The algorithm's features parameters and variables. Okay, how does it weigh certain things, like in terms of, is this more important than that? What are the characteristics that it uses? And a process for auditability. So simply put, it should be short, straight to the point, and people can ask additional questions if they need to, but it's at least a high-level enough description that people can understand what this algorithm does, where the data come from, and why is it even doing this.
All right, thank you. Very good point. So I've heard that it is very important that it's made understandable to the public, that it's not burdensome to businesses, and also that no size fits all, right? So depending on the kind of the dangers of the algorithm's decisions, if you will, different criteria requirements should apply. So let's move to the second question. We touched upon regulatory landscape, very dynamic landscape. So I would like to look at some of the what different countries are doing in a bit more detail. So let's start with Drazen this round. There has been a lot of activity in the EU. You started talking about Article 52. Can you tell us about this upcoming regulation and what impacts do you anticipate? You already said it may kill everything that moves. So any more thoughts on that?
So this is still a draft that is proposed, and this discussion is open, and I'm not sure how similar the final document will look like to this current version of the document. But this is just one of the documents that are either already accepted or in progress in European Union. So basically, you have GDPR as general data protection regulations in Europe. Beside the AI regulation that is in progress, you also have DSA, Digital Services Act, you have also Data Governance Act, and this all is tending to become too complex. Also GDPR is by many considered too complex and having too much requirements on average company. But then, so I'm very heavily involved in data privacy. So we are developing platform for data management of data privacy related processes of personal data. So I'm very deep in this area, and actually all of those stuff is building upon this Personal Data Protection Act. And for us as people, it's very important because all this stuff is actually to serve us and to help us to protect our privacy and to protect our interest. I also think that some of those regulations and acts are too strict and too complicated. But I think all involved parties should be open to find something that is applicable and easy to understand and easy to implement. So there is a difference between Europe and America, and this difference is so in America, everything that is not strictly forbidden is considered allowed. And in Europe, everything that's not strictly allowed is considered forbidden. So that's why there are so much more people and companies in US that are innovative, that are trying something new. And in Europe, we are more conservative, but we need to change this if we want to be competitive. But at the other hand, we need to protect people's rights and privacy. And actually, privacy is one of the basic human rights that is defined in chapter of United Nations. So.
Thank you. Natali, Serbia is actively working on guidelines for ethical AI and also developing a law on ethical use of trustworthy AI. Can you please tell us about the approach, the process of this regulation development, and the impact you expect on companies like Telekom Serbia?
Yes, well, we are not directly involved with all that it's going on, but when the strategy for artificial intelligence, national strategy, was developed a few years ago, this is one, developing guidelines for ethical AI was one of the very important parts and of this strategy. So definitely things are progressing. Serbia signed also this UNESCO chart last year. So it's important for our government, but I think that we are always going a little bit after Europe. So definitely Serbia will follow Europe regulation when this regulation is in place. But when I'm looking from perspective of my company, Telekom Serbia, I am not sure that there is immediate effect and that it will be big effect. Why? Because first, I think the data privacy and that is actually still a big issue and challenge here, and this is the most important part that we are still working on and that we are still addressing. And second, most of applications of AI in telecom in general, like an industry, should be expected in the part of operations, so improving efficiency. Yes, there will be some that will be related to managing customers and their offers and personalization, but all these ways and applications of AI by Artificial Intelligence Act of European Union that is now in process and that is addressing this are small or medium risk, which means that there might not even be the requirement for some transparency or explainability. But personally, I think that a little bit more should be done on all. We need to understand more algorithms that we are using in the network, but it will not be regulated. When we are talking about the process in general, that does not mean that we should not think about how AI and data are affecting customers, how this is connected. So what we are doing, so it's our practice not mandated by the law, but my big data and AI team is regularly discussing with our DPO office, Data Protection Office, any machine learning algorithm. It's not still AI, we are doing machine learning, but they are discussing it and asking for checking whether they can do something or and under which rules. So recently, I will not say what, but we were denied to do something, and I'm happy because that means process works. It was said, this you cannot do, so you need to forget about this, all these other things you can do. So obviously, that is how processes should be implemented in the company, not wait for regulation. Let's start thinking about what actually makes sense for customers and what is moral thing to do. I mean, a little bit we can do ourselves without regulation also.
So I can just say one thing. So you know how Serbia and Croatia always like to compete. So Croatia doesn't have AI strategy yet. So so at least you are in front of one European Union country in this area.
And a plug for the World Bank. I believe the World Bank has been involved in helping Serbia develop the AI strategy, and it is in fact one of the more advanced countries in the world that are doing it.
But we also need to implement some of the action plans, so it should not be just the document with the strategy. At the end, it's about translating into actions and doing things.
Yeah, absolutely. Branko, until recently, you worked in the United States. Drazen referred to it as a land where everything is permitted unless explicitly prohibited. So there are several laws on algorithm transparency that have been proposed, such as the Filter Bubble Transparency Act and the Algorithmic Accountability Act. In neighboring Canada, the government is developing its Algorithmic Impact Assessment Program to monitor the use of AI in public life. Can you tell us about the approach to algorithm transparency that these proposed laws will include?
Sure. I had to take some notes because the laws are a little complex, but I'll just break them down into simple kind of chats. So there are a bunch of different efforts going on in the United States to define frameworks, principles, standards, and guidelines. Unfortunately, nobody's working together to do it. It's just kind of all separate. Congress, on the other hand, is debating two laws. One is the Filter Bubble Act, and the other one is the Algorithmic Accountability Act. So the Bubble Act actually targets Facebook, Instagram, and other social media sites. And what they want to do is they want these companies to change their algorithm so that consumers can opt out of receiving personalized content feeds based upon unsolicited data. So you know how Facebook will take location data, or sometimes I think it even listens to you and starts spitting out advertisements, you know, about something you talked about. Here I said fashion and friends, and all of a sudden they get 20 things about fashion and friends. How does this know? So using data that you haven't given it, given to these companies, shouldn't be used for content feeds. The problem is though, Facebook and Instagram tested this feature, and they found out that their consumers were not very happy. Why? Because the content feeds were disjointed. Nothing was of interest to them. It was just a bunch of gibberish. And so that wouldn't work, so Facebook started pushing back on Congress very successfully. The other thing is that every large business now, every network, from airline members to hotels to grocery stores, use curated apps to create personal sort of experiences for their consumers. So you can't stop them all from doing this. So I think my belief is that this act will not pass because the business lobby is just too strong for it, and it doesn't really make any sense when you think about social networks. The Algorithmic Accountability Act, that's another one that's under debate now in US Congress, requires companies, private sector companies, to conduct impact assessments on their algorithmic decision-making systems. So they define the guidelines, and this includes the description of the privacy risks. It includes potential negative impacts on consumer safety. It also asks if the system reacts differently based upon race, gender, age, et cetera. So it wants to impact those, it wants to measure those sort of societal reasons. And then what they want to do is publish a company's systems online along with their impact assessment results and how to test those results. So that's still under deliberation, but it will show you, yes, this algorithm has this impact on you, society. But Canada's Algorithmic Impact Assessment, it's actually a program. It might be covered under a law, but they're much more ahead. They have an operational impact assessment template that's scoreable and easy to understand. It's available online. Anybody can download it. And it includes little room for free text. So you can't write a bunch of dreamer-like high-level things. Yes, we're independent because we value our consumers. No, there's actually criteria that you score. And your scores, this is for public sector systems only, but it can be expanded to private sector systems. These scores are, this assessment is mandatory, and the scores are going to be published online. So then on their open government portal. So they already have something, and it's actually being reused by some countries, although I'm not sure exactly what, but there is a certain level of reuse because the scoreability allows you to compare different systems in a common format. Yes, we have these systems that impact society heavily. We need to monitor those. These are less impactful, so we can, you know, once in a while take a look at them.
In terms of which companies it will affect, like I believe in the EU, it's companies with staff over 250 people. Is that correct, Drazen? And is there a similar provision in Canada?
Yeah, so larger companies would have to be subject of this regulation. So it's not applicable for micro, small, and medium companies.
In Canada, it's just for public sector systems, but in the United States, the Bubble Act is, and the definitions in the United States are extreme. So it's companies that reach over $10 million in revenue year over year with 5,000 employees or more. So that was the limitation there.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. So moving on to the next question, what are the practical challenges for companies? So Natali, some companies have argued that asking them to open their code to be transparent, it's like asking Coca-Cola to reveal their recipe for their beverage, that it's just not fair to ask. In your view, is a loss of competitive advantage as a result of opening an algorithm a real risk?
Well, I'm sure that for many of the companies it would be, like mentioned here, and all these big brands and all, let's say, digital companies that are collecting data that we are not giving. So for them, it is definitely changing their business model. I mean, but we can name these companies very easily, and it's not really something that is going to happen to every large company that exists and every enterprise, because if I can reflect to what they were talking earlier, is it the size of the company or it's the number of people that actually the algorithm can address? Because a small group of people, of 3 people, can create algorithm that can address millions. So I think that it should be defined differently. My personal opinion, the impact of AI should be measured and regardless of the size of the company. But for sure, for many, that will be a problem. I personally think that for us, for our business, competitive advantage will not be measured by AI applications towards the customers, but more internal that will improve our efficiency. And if we need to open more information about what we are doing in this process of transparency or explainability, also our competitors will have to do it as well. So at the end, the game will be again about products, portfolio, customer experience, and not on AI and only on AI. So I think that for us, there is not a big risk right now, talking for telco industry in Serbia, but many companies for sure will have a problem. And they will fight against it. What you were saying, that is why the fight in US exists.
Yeah, for sure. So Branko, other companies have argued that it's technically impossible when you put thousands or tens of thousands of data points into an algorithm. It's often calculated instantaneously. It's like making a soup. Once you put all the ingredients in, it's technically impossible to go back and disassemble it. How serious do you think are these arguments of technical barriers to transparency?
There's merit to them, of course, but I'm not a very technical person, so I'm going to give this my best shot in layman's terms. And it seems to me that there's 2 factors in this question. Sorry about that. One is the data and the type of algorithm used and how it learns, right? So 2 different things, right? I think it's technically possible to retrieve an algorithm's data, both inputs and outputs in most cases. The problem is that the sheer volume of that data and the formats are going to be so cumbersome that nobody will understand what it means, that a human cannot go through all that data and make sense of it, right? The type of algorithm that's being used is a different story. If it's a rule-based system where the learning patterns are predefined, it's technically possible to explain, yes, this is what the algorithm does. In supervised machine learning systems, where the training data and the desired outputs are defined, you can kind of infer what the algorithm's learning patterns are. You could say, yes, we got this data, we wanted this input, the algorithm is most likely to do X, Y, Z steps in order to come to this conclusion. The case, however, in unsupervised machine learning systems is the most complex. Here, there's no labels, and the algorithm is left to make decisions on its own, to define data patterns, to recommend results by itself. And this makes it almost impossible, technically, to explain what this algorithm is doing and what kind of connections and relationships it's making. So That's my answer in short. The data retrieval is not the hardest part. It's actually in some of these unsupervised machine learning algorithms where we don't know what goes on in that black box that you referred to before.
Drazen, besides trade secrets or technical barriers, are there other barriers or issues potentially for companies?
I think the main issues are still legal and ethical issues. So how to use data and what is legal and what is ethical. So Natali mentioned this situation where their data scientists are going to ask their DPO if they can do this or they can do that. But we have a customer that is like global pharma company. They are doing trial research worldwide. So in 170 countries, they have 50, 60 different regulations, different languages, different scripts, different trial cases. And what happens when data scientists come to DPO to ask them, can I do this? And DPO says, I don't know. Because those regulations are so complex that you just don't know what you can do in Portugal or what you can do in Thailand or what you can do in Canada, because you are not allowed to do the same things. And in many situations, this is a base for no-go decision, because big companies are not prepared to take this high risk to go into something that may not be either legal or ethical or both. So we are in situation to help some of our big global customers to overcome this problem. But automation of those processes will definitely help to overcome this. So from my perspective, ethical and legal reasons are still the main obstacle. Other thing that is important is, so you don't have only personal data. You have actually 3 or 4 types of data. So you have personal data, you have non-personal data, you have synthetic data, so not real data, so data that is synthesized to be used in algorithms, and you have hybrid data. That is actually a combination of different types of data. Currently, only personal data is regulated. All other types of data is not regulated, but what we can expect, other types of data will be regulated, and this whole environment and ecosystem will become more and more complex. And I think in last week, we had 2 examples that this will be like huge battleground of the future. So first example is Google. So did you hear that Google had a big settlement in US this week? So they paid $391 million to 40 different US states because they were collecting location data of their users without their approval. So they continued collecting this data after they explicitly said, we don't allow you to collect our location data. So that's the first thing. That's the good thing for us as end users and consumers. And the second thing that is important is you heard for Twitter, Elon Musk, know this guy? So he like laid off half of the Twitter employees. Within those half of Twitter employees, there was one team that was called Meta, but not Meta as Facebook. This is short of, I don't know what. But actually, they were in charge of analyzing how their AI algorithms are working. Are they transparent? Those I think ET is like ethical and transparency. how their algorithms are working, and are they biased towards left or right or racially or whatever,
So-
and he just cut them off.
Drazen, if I may jump in, you started talking about kind of the last question that I have for the panel is what are the emerging practices in the company? So you mentioned that Twitter had this team internally analyzing it. You know, we know that other companies require internally traceability and explainability. If somebody trains a data set, they must record who did it, what data they did for internal kind of auditing. There are some companies introducing impact assessments internally. So I would like to ask each of you, what are these practices, good practices that you're seeing both in companies and in governments? So Branko, maybe you can start with governments since you worked with them a lot.
So yeah, I dealt mostly with the U.S. federal government on bringing artificial intelligence and other emerging tech to them. And although you may think that government is slow to react and is much behind industry, where it usually is, there are some areas where it actually is ahead. And some of those best practices can be applied to the private sector. One is doing these impact assessments, not just in the development phase, but in the deployment phase as well. How is that, and creating mitigation strategies for negative impacts. Because you want to know where the bias is and what do you need to do to close that bias as soon as possible and reduce the risk to your company. So that's really important. Government does that because their impact can be huge. Denying people insurance, denying people housing, those are all things that come into play. One thing that I haven't seen a lot of in private sector here, although I may be completely wrong, is an effective data management and governance structure. So in terms of, this should be done at an organizational level, so okay, where's your data, what formats is it in, what are the sources of truth of that data, and these also should be at the algorithm level, where you're creating algorithms to study different data. There's the composition of that governance structure. It should include various people as well, and maybe in some cases where things are very, very hotly debated, information ethicists, just to make sure that you're covered. And finally, and this is, I have to say, this is the most important one, is that please do not rush to implement an AI solution and replace it, and replace humans with that solution. That happens way too often. We have an automated system, it's been trained, let's take this person, move this somewhere else, and let the system do this for us. No, humans should be involved in the operation of that artificial intelligence solution until, for however long it takes to reach a certain level of accuracy, because nothing can replace human rationality or the context that humans understand situations in.
Yeah, I will be just very short, but definitely from one side, very important are those initiatives in companies that are related to ethics and compliance. And also data governance is coming, knocking on the doors. So you must know where your data is. You must have really, really good data discovery, data inventory. You must be aware of that, because if you don't know, and currently all the Facebooks and Googles and Amazons and Twitters, they don't know where all personal data in their systems are. This is the way where you can have this both transparency and explainability and also accountability for the stuff that you are doing within your company.
I have not much to add. I will just say that this is what we've realized, and we are involved in data governance. This is the process that we now need to set up because and this is the basis for everything else that will come from regulation. And if I know that our government also plans to have, when all these acts are passed, I think there will be education for the private sector, not only for the public. And I think it's very important because there is lack of understanding on company levels of importance of this, and the impact at the end on the brand and the image of the company can be huge if this is not treated properly. So I think that it is very, very important to start dealing with this now, while we are still, at least in Serbia, not in US for sure, but in Serbia on a lower level of AI implementations. It's more like niche machine learning algorithms, and this is good because we have room to do it fast and to do it in a proper way.
Thank you. So the last thing I would like to ask you is just to share closing remarks. Anything that maybe we didn't cover or something that stood out to you, just very brief round of closing remarks.
I think we're already too late and people are here for the next panel session. So maybe.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, we will
think we said
close.
enough.
Thank you very much.